I have a brief introductory talk because we have the members of the Hellenic Association for Friedreich's Ataxia, the carers, the patients in Greece and abroad, the members of the medical community, researchers, representatives of pharmaceutical companies, friends, and all of you. We would like to welcome you in this effort that we are doing at the Institute of Pasteur, which we would like to thank for hosting us. Today is a day of hope. Why? Because our patients from all over Greece, whether they are together with us in this hall or through the internet, after many years that they were expecting for the highlighting of their disease, this becomes a reality. The success of today's event proves that with collective work, effort, targets, we can achieve a lot. Through the brief period of time from our foundation, our association managed to highlight in Greece Friedreich's ataxia, but also in Southern Eastern Europe, in the framework of an ambitious, but at the same time realistic action plan. We have put certain targets and actions which we implement step by step. Our association has developed successfully the internal and international cooperations, and it is a full member of EuroAtaxia, member of the Association of Patients in Greece of Rare Diseases. Our association also considers extremely significant the cooperation that it has developed in recent years with US Research Ataxia Alliance, which we would like to thank for their support in today's event. Allow me to address our patients all over Greece, who, most of them, are at an advanced stage of their illness, and as a result, they cannot be with us here today. I would like to address the guys in Veria, Thessaloniki, Chalkidiki, in the island of Paxous, the island of Corfu, Komotini, island of Kos, Heraklion, and Chania in Crete, Trikala, Lagada, Thessaloniki, and the island of Kalymnos. Also, I would like to address all our patients, their carers and parents who have enrolled in today's conference and are following the conference in more than 22 countries in the world: Argentina, Brazil, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Cyprus, Germany.
Recording in progress.
Βασίλη, μιλάς? Τώρα έχεις.
Όπως θα μας πει η πρόεδρος των 95, κυρία Μέρη Αδαμοπούλου,
Mrs. Adamopoulou, because 6 to 8% of people in Europe have a rare disease. This reflects to 30 million citizens in the European Union. In all these people, we have to give some hope, and our efforts converge towards this point. Of course, we are not disillusioned. We know that we have a very difficult road ahead of us. We hope that we are very close to the first treatment and of the disease. Our job as representatives of the patients starts now, since we have to begin so that these therapies will be available and accessible to our patients both in Greece and abroad. We are sure that the state will stand by us to the rare patient and show their interest and give equal opportunities to all the people. I would like to thank all of you, and without any further ado, let's begin our conference. Let's give the floor to Mr. Gerapetritis, Minister of State, to address the conference. I would like to thank you for the invitation to this first Pan-Hellenic conference for Friedreich's Ataxia and wish you good luck in this conference for the clinical and approval of the first drugs that are going to help towards this direction. I have sent a big, which sends a big message of hope to all the citizens that they suffer from any kind of disease. I would like to talk to you about Mr. Karatzias' contribution, who is serving this purpose, and my hope is that things will change to the best for the state mechanism, who at some degree has made some steps forward in order to enhance the public policy for disability, and I think it is a very good example of the horizontal policy of the state, and it was the first public policy that the new government undertook in 2019, following the recommendations of the United Nations for the rights of disabled people, and after systemic work, we had the National Action Plan for disabled people, and it was put into public dialogue in 2020, and it constitutes a very detailed approach with 6 pillars, 30 targets, actions that have specific body of implementation, specific budget, and specific timetable of implementation. We enhance all the practices, and on the other hand, for the first time, we have closed together all the actions that have to do with disability, with a central control system for the development of the National Action Plan. We have actions, the activation, of course, of the coordinating mechanism in all regions and municipalities and ministries. There is a reference point for monitoring this action plan so that we can have the real owner of its body who is responsible. And we set up the National Committee of Accessibility, the counseling body for the state, from people from Greece and abroad of high prestige that work with intensive rate in order to develop these policies. We had a wide codification of all the circulars that have to do with disability. Let me point out that we are talking about a field where the multi-laws was not a good example, a huge effort that was concentrated in over 7,000 pages so that each and every citizen will understand in a unified text the rights they have. We already have the electronic platform of accessibility for all the buildings of public interest, so that on the first level we can record, and second level to improve the accessibility of public buildings, although already we have 30,500 buildings on this platform, and we have recorded a relevant amount of money from the recovery fund so that we can work this institution. We have the institutionalization of the first pilot program for the personal carer with 1,000 positions and beneficiaries with a certified disability of at least 67% for the region of Attica, and then for the rest of Greece. We have the inclusive approach in education, and on another level, we have employed 4,000 teachers for students of special needs and problems, so that we can have an essential educational policy for people with disabilities. We concluded the national strategy of implementation, and we will have the deinstitutionalization policy, and we have the unified page gov.gr, which is the first accessible platform of the public administration, certified with the highest degree, 3A, with the rights of the people of disabilities, and each and every person can have direct and without restrictions access. And in the next period, we have the unified card of disability, the transfer of HEFAA into modern places in the Peace and Friendship Stadium, and of course, we have updating of the National Action Plan with new significant actions. Every society is judged with the respect that they show to the vulnerable citizens. I think that it's time we have inclusive policies in order to have a society open and accessible to everybody. Thank you very much. I hope you have a very fruitful conference with fruitful results. Thank you, State Minister, and allow me to read the message of Mr. Plevris, the Minister for Health. Honorable President, dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for your invitation and hope that you achieve the targets of the conference. I feel a great pleasure that today I address this pan-Hellenic conference. Ataxia means lack of taxes. As an illness, as a disease, causes the lack of taxes and autonomous movement. The conference is a landmark for our country because it's the first time in Greece. The issues that we are going to discuss are very impressive. The researches and the clinical research give us the hope for this disease. The people who suffer have the opportunity to speak in public for the problems they face and let us know the needs that they have. It is important to listen to all the problems they have so that we can relieve them both from the side of the state and science. They are symbols of persistence and courage, and we have to stand by them. It is important to have such scientific initiatives, information, awareness, exchange of opinion, education, clinical research, and direct communication with the people lead to the best service and better. I would like to welcome all the speakers from Greece and abroad and the organizers that they have worked hard for the success of this conference. I would like to address this conference and I wish you every success. Athanasios Plevris, Minister for Health. And let's hope that the Ministry of Health will embrace this initiative and will really stand by these patients. Now I will give the floor to the president of the Neurologic Society, Mr. Tsivgoulis, professor with huge scientific background, to talk to us about, to address the conference. Dear colleagues, dear patients, good morning. I am Georgios Tsivgoulis, professor of neurology of the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens and president of the Hellenic Neurologic Society. I address the initiative of the Hellenic Society for Friedreich's Ataxia for the organization of the first Pan-Hellenic conference. As a scientist and neurologist, I consider extremely important the public discussion that will promote the significance of this rare disease and the urgent need in order to find treatment. The presentation of modern scientific developments of the pioneering clinical trials that are taking place globally will offer new hopes to the patients that they suffer from this disease in order to have the best possible tackling of it. And now let's give the floor to Professor Neurology, Mr. Stefanis. Good morning. You have the floor, Professor. Good morning. I would like to thank for the invitation. I would like to address this fantastic conference. It is the first meeting for Friedreich's Ataxia in Greece. Congratulations to the organizers. The program of the conference is very interesting. In our neurologic department, we have been addressing this disease and recording of patients from all over Greece, and we are doing a recording of incidents on a European network from Mario Panas and now Mr. Kouchis and Ms. Karadima. Therefore, as a clinic, we have a particular connection with the disease. My wife is a pediatrician neurologist, and she very often mentions children with Friedreich's ataxia and the burden that brings to the families. Therefore, all together, we have to embrace this effort that is taking place and to be able to the patients that we have to include them in clinical research and to give a boost to research and addressing this rare and difficult disease. Good luck to the conference. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Here we have learned that we must have the power of soul, and I think that has been shown. The Olympic winner of our heart, Mrs. Voula Patoulidou, who is together with us with the Olympic winner, but also the deputy head of the region of governor of Thessaloniki region. Good morning to everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, I am in front of you with awe, and I'm saying I'm standing because some scientists managed to do so. Realizing the awe, I would like to express my awe to these people who are trying to find solutions for problems of people who, while we consider that we do not have any problems, the pandemic showed us how vulnerable we are. We have constant challenges that we have to face, and of course, with the help of the scientists, we can overcome the hurdles. The funding of the infrastructure and the biological department of the Aristotle University in Thessaloniki was not only a need, but it was the need of the soul in order to support these people. The region of Macedonia, which is of Western Macedonia, is important because when you get the approval for the funding. It is not the job of the region, it is the job of us, and we have to bend down to the scientists because they are like athletes to win a prize. Our prize is perhaps a medal, but the medal for the scientists is to win your life and to win the life for a certain people. Yes, 35,000 euros that we spend is nothing, but if this helps from a wheelchair to have a child standing up and to help another child to tackle their problem, I believe that we have a specific reason that we exist. Ataxia can only bring to take away the A and bring back order, taxes, in order to win our life. Thank you very much, and we will always be standing by you. The Pasteur work is well known, and we found out, those of us that we didn't know, due to the pandemic. We have been here for a very short time, and we feel that we have been accepted by these people. We would like to help them, but Mr. Stathis should allow us, give us a short address to the conference, please. Thank you, Mrs. Spiropoulou, Chair, dear participants, patients, above all, it's a great pleasure to host you here. The Hellenic Institute of Pasteur will constantly help towards these efforts, not only by providing our premises, but as you very well know, we do a lot of research for human health, services on diagnosis, not only the coronavirus, but other diseases, and of course, research to the wider field of neurology. Therefore, our actions are very many good projects, and I hope that the next challenge we will have fruitful results and to have a note of optimism. Have a good conference. Thank you very much. I think that the scientific community proved during the pandemic, because if you don't have any health problems, we do not really understand how important is the health issue. Now with the pandemic, we all realize that, and how important is the scientific community, and how we should let them to guide us, because with the evolution of science, we are going to have positive results, and we will give hope for the people of Friedreich's ataxia. Allow us, now that I talked about rare diseases, to give the floor to Mrs. Mary Adamopoulou. 95 associations of associations. We are talking about the 95% of the people that do not have a treatment. And you can see this in front of you when you don't know where to address, when you are lost. Ms. Adamopoulou, you talk to us. Good morning. Maria Adamopoulou. I am the president of Association 95 with all over Greece, representing patients with rare diseases, and for the first time in Greece we diagnose people. I have a child with a syndrome Williams. It is a great pleasure to be with you in this Pan-Hellenic conference in order to inform for this rare disease, which is very difficult to address, and for children and adults. And of course, we have the imperative need for clinical research in order to find a treatment for the people who suffer. At this point, personally, I would like to thank my personal friend, Mr. Vasileios Karatzias, for the invitation and for the cooperation with our association. We we belong to, yes, conferences like the one today are extremely important, whether they are from the initiative of the patients or the cooperation of other people, not only for the latest developments and exchange of best practices, but because we all benefit, all the stakeholders, the most positive results. Of course, we have the real needs of the patients, we change attitude and we enhance cooperation. The treatment is one of the most important issues. The rare diseases, 6,000 to 8,000, is a category of diseases which impose to the patient and the family a huge burden. And the burden is in all sectors, somatic, psychological, social, financial, educational. So the journey has, the patient has a very difficult journey in order to manage, in order to have access, the holistic care, social exclusion, stigma. We should not forget that 50% of the population are children. Therefore, we are talking about very young people and with low life expectancy. With 95% of these diseases not having a treatment, we understand that the continuous care of the patients and the daily fight to survive exhaust the patient himself and their family. Cooperation is of all the stakeholders, the academia, the pharmaceutical industry, the society, scientists, health professionals, so that we can invest into research. We are here and I am really relieved at the turning point where we can cooperate and we have a golden opportunity to exploit fully what the pandemic taught to us. And perhaps within the time not to lose patience, to invest today in what makes the unique hope for the rare diseases, research, development of therapies, drugs, in order to reach the patient. I would like to wish you good luck in the conference, and I expect with great interest the speeches of the foreign scientists and the patients. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Adamopoulou, dear Mary. And now, at this point, I would like to welcome our first panel. Welcome Mr. Kimiskidi, and from Mr. Koutsis and Mrs. Karadima, Mr. Likisas, to take their seats in the panel. Give us 1 minute.
Δεν ξέρω αν ακουγόμαστε.
Can you hear us? I don't know whether you can hear us. Good morning, Mr. Kimiskidis. I don't know whether you can hear me. Yes, perfectly. I know that you had a very difficult day. And I know that you tried very hard to be together with us today. And thank you very much for it. Mr. Kimiskidis is a professor in neurology, director of the first neurology clinic from HEFAA, the University Hospital of Thessaloniki, We would like to thank you very much. You have the floor. Dear President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to this first session, the panel discussion. Prior to starting, allow me to congratulate the Hellenic Association for Ataxia of Friedreich and Mr. Karatzias personally for the organization of this conference, which is necessary and required today because the radical developmental progresses and the emerging treatments impose that all the involved parties work together, physicians, patients, the state, and I think that this is very clear in the perfect structure of today's conference. So let's start. Asking the question, what is Friedreich's ataxia? First of all, it is a rare disease, a disease that affects 1 in 50,000 people, but the carriers of the disease are many more, 1 to 70 or 90 people. It is considered a classic degenerative disease with very specific characteristics. Either we talk about sensory situation and state or the movement. Of course, there are subclasses of the classic phenotype. And we also have myocardiopathy, scoliosis, diabetes, and other manifestations as well. It is a rare picture of this Friedreich's ataxia, and I would like to stress 2 things. First of all, I mentioned that we're talking about a neurodegenerative disease, but from a clinical point of view, many times it is classified along with the musculoskeletal neuromusculoskeletal diseases, and we have 12 patients at HEFAA hospital together with other patients with muscular dystrophy, etc. And there, it is quite clear that this disease is something special. It is different from all the others. I can mention 2 or 3 things. First of all, the Duchenne dystrophy, etc., are aggressive in the beginning, but in Friedreich's ataxia, this is something later during adolescence, and the progress is not so fast. The pulmonary function is a problem with the other dystrophies, but later on in Friedreich's ataxia. So there are specific differences, but there is also a common characteristic, and this is that in these neuromuscular diseases, the cooperation between many specialties required. This is something that has been set out in the guidelines about Friedreich's ataxia. This is something that we have to talk about today, whether all these guidelines are applied for the benefit of our patients. Another characteristic is the age of onset. Most of the patients with Friedreich's ataxia are at the age of 5 or later on. There are some patients that the onset of the disease is earlier than 5 years of age. 80 to 90% of the patients, we have the onset of the disease in the period from 5 to 20 years old. So practically, what does this mean? It means that we need a treatment that practically addresses all the age spectrum. It means that the patients, we are going to live with this disease from the childhood to adolescence, from adolescence to adulthood. They are going to go to primary education, secondary education, university, try to find work, and in these phases of their life, they are going to need a specific treatment. What is this specific treatment? This is something that we're going to talk about in this first session. I would like to ask Mr. Dinopoulos, Argyris Dinopoulos, Associate Professor in Pediatric Neurology at Attiko Hospital, to take the floor and talk to us about the beginning of this disease. Mr. Dinopoulos, you have the floor. Please unmute. And also share the screen.
Εντάξει.
Πολύ ωραία. Πολύ ωραία.
Okay.
Γεια σας από μένα. Είμαι σε...
Hello. Thank you very much, Mr. Karatzias, for the invitation. It is a conference, as I heard, from the people that practically deal with this neurodegenerative disease, and I admire them, because every day we talk with families that have children with neurodegenerative diseases. And I really hope that at the end of this conference, we are going to have fruitful conclusions or fruitful findings that are going to help these patients. I'm going to talk to you about childhood. The disease in childhood and some clinical characteristics of the Friedreich ataxia in childhood, and I use this motto because practically we are experiencing some very good days that we see diseases that in the past could not be treated or curable, and could lead to death. And nowadays we see that there are molecular techniques of genetic processing that practically can change the morbidity landscape. And I really believe that very soon something will arise for Friedreich's ataxia. This is why my presentation is going to be a review of the primary signs. We see that in all these diseases, the earlier that we can apply this genetic treatment, the better for the patient. So the early diagnosis at the point that the child does not show many symptoms, we have an accumulation practically of all the signs, the symptoms of mobility skills. It is not like the other neuromuscular diseases Here we have some introductory notes. We're talking about a known old disease. In the German Nicholas Friedrich described for the first time all the symptoms, as we know. The majority of the general damage is practically due to FXN mutations, and this means a reduced synthesis of frataxin. And this gene can be expressed in the cerebellum, in spinal cord, heart, muscle, pancreas, the spine, and we have the various symptoms of the disease. And in contrast to other diseases that practically genetically are due to similar situations, DAA3 nucleotide expansions in intron 1, things are a bit different here. Frataxin, which is the protein that is a regulator, practically. The nuclear symptoms, as they are very clearly described, is the progressive cerebellar ataxia, usually observed up to the age of 15. And there are sensory problems, dysarthria, myocardiopathy, musculoskeletal lesions, and of course, diabetes mellitus, which is not a neurological sign, but it is manifested in this disease. If you know, children come to us with ataxia, but at the beginning, everything is normal. Here we have Andreas, 9 years old, that cannot tie his shoes. Something that his classmates have managed years ago. His mother helps him to wash his hair and cut his food. And we see that progressively this child, although could do all these things in the past, and now he cannot, tries to adjust to the difficulties that are presented. And here we have the ataxia that we see established slowly, difficulties in getting down the stairs, and this ataxia is cerebral and at the same time sensory, because we can see that very often. Here we have the scale for the assessment and rating of ataxia. The acronym is SARA. It is used by all clinicians, and it is used to recognize the disease. We use this tool, this instrument, for our patients with ataxia, and of course, patients with Friedreich ataxia. There are other specific tools. And let's see this situation. Here you can see a child, the way that he walks. Practically, the child does not fall down, very quickly walks, but there is something in his gait. It is not normal. Sometimes it goes towards a corner or a table, cannot turn away. And sometimes we ask the child to have this type of walking, something that cannot be achieved when we have the ataxia. very difficult for the child to do it. And in this way, we assess the gait, the walking. Another way to assess is the stance, the posture of the body. We can assess it as a stance with a wide support base. We have the grade 10, and we see whether a child can stand in this way for 10 seconds, as in this case. You can see that it's very difficult. Things become more difficult when we ask the child to join the 2 feet together. In this case, there is no way that the child can stand upright. And more difficult things become when we have this support base, one leg in front of the other. In this way, we grade the stance. Then we have the sitting position. The sitting position in the beginning is not affected, but later on it is affected. We see that the child here is not affected in the sitting position, normal sitting position, no difficulties. And the assessment of the speech is important. Speech disturbance is very important, the impaired speech. We ask the child to talk, and we can see that there is anarthria in many cases. Then we go to the limbs, the finger chase, as we call it. As you can see here, where the child is asked to do specific movements, and we measure dysmetria. In this case, there is dysmetria that is lower than 5 centimeters. In the nose finger test, in this test, we can assess dysmetria again, but also tremor. In the specific case, between 2 and 5 centimeters. Another test is the test of fast alternating hand movement. We see that there are slow movements in many cases, and in this case, we see that it is slightly irregular. And another test, quite difficult to be performed by children, heel shin slide, where the ataxic patients have this pathological abnormal manifestation. In this way, we examine children and we can easily see if there are some early forms of ataxia, because as I said, it is very important to have an early diagnosis, because sooner or later we are going to have some kind of treatments, and we're going to hear to some specialists later on about the possible treatment for the ataxia. We have used adebenone with some good results and stabilization in these tests. We really hope that a gene treatment or a gene modification treatment will address the problem in a more functional way. And after the early diagnosis by the pediatricians, as I said before, that the neurodegeneration has not progressed, we would be able to treat them. I really hope that this conference will give us fruitful conclusions. We are experiencing a period of hope in neurodegenerative diseases. I would like to thank Mr. Dimopoulos for this very informative presentation. We gave us a brief and full picture of this disease. It is a degenerative disease, and it is very important to have the opinion of a physician for the adult patients as well. And this is why we're going to have Mr. Koutsis with us. Mr. Koutsis, who is an assistant professor of neurology and neurogenetics. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I feel extremely...
I think there are too many patients here which are Greek speaking, and for some of them it might not be ideal. So since you have this concomitant translation, I will switch to Greek. Sorry about this. Okay. Γεια σας.
Good morning. I'm very glad to see so many people here in the room with families and patients. I come from the Eginitio hospital together with Karatzias for many years, managing the genetic department of the hospital. I'm going to mention two more things. Since 2017 at the Eginitio hospital, we are participating in this European registry, and we see the patients prospectively. We have this follow-up, trying to be closer to the European activities and actions, trying to have our patients in studies and trials and have access to various drugs. The first neurologic clinic at the Eginitio hospital was recognized as a center of rare diseases, neurological diseases. We are a member of the European Reference Network, and FRIEDREIC'S ATAXIA is included in the diseases that have been certified in this framework as a rare hereditary ataxias, and this is going to help our patients in the future. This is the structure of my speech. It's quite brief. The introductory elements have already been said. I don't want to tire you by saying the same things again and again. Just two clinical points, perhaps, to be underlined for the neurologists. Then I'm going to talk to you about the epidemiology in Greece, as these data have been collected for the 25 years in the clinic. A very brief picture of the clinical progress of the Greek patients. We're going to see very briefly the algorithm that we use, but of course the genetic and molecular approach is going to be touched upon by Mrs. Karatzias later on. Nikolaus Friedreich was the first one to describe the disease, the German, and very soon he understood that it was a hereditary disease. In 1996, the gene was discovered. Let's say here that this expansion that leads to the loss of movement, it is a residual disease, a residual gene, and if the two allelome, we have the symptoms. If the gene is inherited from the two parents, residual ataxias, as you can see here, just 2% of all the ataxias. There is a gradient. When we talk about the prevalence in Europe, it seems that it is more frequent in Western Europe and becomes rarer when we go towards the East. But of course, this is not something specific about the clinical picture. I'm not going to spend much time here. The first symptom may not be neurological. 1 in 50 patients, the first thing that experiences is perhaps cardiac, and visits a cardiologist. But in the majority, the first symptom is the problems of walking. Also, the characteristic is the sensory cerebellar ataxia from the beginning, not just cerebellar. We have a mixed ataxia, and this means something practical for the neurologist as well. In the first years, usually do not have cerebellar atrophy that cannot be seen in the MRI. And this means that sometimes the diagnosis is not specific. Cerebellar atrophy comes later on in this disease. There is a percentage of atypical forms. In the Greek patients, 10 to 15% of the patients, the disease starts later than 25 years of age and progresses slowly. And this is related to the number of the repetitions of the alleles later smaller than 200. Now, at the Eginitio hospital, we said that 1996 the gene was found. In 1997, we tried to have the first molecular diagnosis. 1997, 2021, 92 series of patients representing families of patients where we have residual manifestation or sporadic ataxia. Half of them have Friedreich ataxia. And we see the incidence of this ataxia in the Greek population. All these years, Georgia at the laboratory with her assistants have diagnosed 111 patients. I want to stress that the neurogenetic unit has been the only laboratory in the public health system that continuously ongoing without interruptions offers a molecular diagnosis, and I believe that we have patients from all over Greece. In the first years, patients used to go to Cyprus, but in the last 10 years, our unit, our clinic plays the most important role. And here you can see the cases based on the residence of the patients. You can see that the disease can be found all over the territory of Greece, at least according to the data that we have. In a study performed some years ago with fewer patients, we tried to see whether some regions show higher prevalence. There was the idea that this is the Aegean Islands, the region of the Aegean Islands, specifically the islands of Ikaria and Milos. The mutation was very prevalent on the island of Milos. A man that had the disease married the carrier of the disease. Pseudodominant was expressed in the children, so we believe that there is an increased incidence on these islands. For the clinical picture of the patient, this is a very busy slide. Based on 111 patients diagnosed in the last 24 years, the gender is, as you can see, divided. The average age that we see the patient is around the age of 25, but many of them had already been diagnosed by children's neurologists. Around the age of 15, we have the onset of the disease. 12 to 13% of the patients have a late manifestation onset of the disease. You can see that the gait symptom is for all the patients. Babinski sign here. As the disease progresses, we have a paralysis of the legs at a certain degree. This is a screenshot of the patients when we show them, but we have to follow up the patients in the years to come. This is the IFAX data here. 13 patients that we have followed up for at least 3 years in the IFAX framework, and we see that this scale presented to you by Mr. Dinopoulos before has a progressive increase, and as an average, in 3 years, our patients had an increase of 4 points in this scale. Last year, we had in Lancet a publication. Do not diverge very much. The speed of progress depends whether the patients are ambulatory or not, the age as well. But I think more or less the conclusions are that our patients are the same with the European patients. 26 patients we have included in the IFAX, a satisfactory number of patients, and I really hope that in the future we are going to have more patients in IFAX. A few words about the suspicion. When you become suspicious that this diagnosis should be made, apart from the medical history of the family, sometimes we have parents that come from the same village, or ataxia has been manifested in another child of the family. Mrs. Paradima is going to talk to you about these things, but in sporadic ataxias as well, with onset before the age of 25, we have to think about the Friedreich's ataxia when we see specific symptoms. In the 50s, we had more children in the family, and now we have only 2 children in a family. By following this, applying this algorithm in a study some years ago from the sporadic patients that have an onset earlier than 25, over half of the patients. Sometimes we see that we can diagnose all the patients that have the ataxia, but sometimes we can, using this algorithm, diagnose an extra 10% of symptomatic patients. The conclusions are that we talk about a residual disease. FXN is the gene responsible, and the repetition of this gene is a more frequent ataxia with an early onset. The prevalence in Greece is 1 in 100,000 patients. It is met all over Greece with some clusters, possible clusters of the islands of the Aegean. The clinical picture of the patients in Greece does not differ from other European patients. 12% has this late onset Friedreich ataxia, and we must suspect that something is wrong when we see patients with some specific symptoms after excluding other causes. I would like to conclude my speech here. You see the key members of our clinic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Koutsis, for this comprehensive presentation that is based on their experience, and I think it was very appropriate, and the role that they have played in the diagnosis of ataxia. Unfortunately, there is no time for questions. Perhaps at the end of the session, some urgent questions may be answered. Now, the next topic, the next speaker, it was mentioned by Mr. Koutsis that cardiological problems sometimes constitute the beginning, the initiation of the diagnosis, but definitely at a big number of patients are the reasons of early mortality. Mr. Yiannopoulos is the professor of pediatric cardiological at the hospital HEFAA. Mr. Yiannopoulos, you have the floor. Good morning to everybody. It is a great pleasure and honor to be present in the first Hellenic conference for Friedreich's ataxia. I would really love to be with you, but due to professional reasons for the HEFAA hospital, I have to be in Thessaloniki. I would like to give my warm congratulations to Mr. Karatzias, the president, who managed, together with his team, to create this Hellenic Association of Friedreich's ataxia. We are talking about a very rare disease, which, together with the creation of this association, we, the doctors, become better, and we feel that we are not alone. We need everybody, we need to be together. And I think what was said at the beginning of the conference is that everybody is welcome. We have to fight together, and all the achievements, the good results derive from collective efforts. My warm congratulations to Mr. Karatzias, and I would like to thank him that he gave me the honor and pleasure to be together with you in this conference. I think, can you see the, okay, can you see the screen? And my slides. Therefore, we are talking about a neurodegenerative disease that creates problems to the cardiovascular. This we have to talk about with neurologists and cardiologists as well, and you will see in which way and how important is the participation of a cardiologist in Friedreich's ataxia. Epidemiologically, lots of things have been mentioned. Definitely, they are more common. It's more common in Caucasian and Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and United States. 1 out of 50,000 or 1 out of 100,000, as it was said, roughly we expect 1 to 2 children to be born per year in Greece. When we have Greece with 100 births per year, we expect 1 or 2 children to be born in Greece. Roughly are these the numbers. Very interesting things were said by Mr. Koutsis, who talked to us about the island of Ikaria. Look, the strange things of nature. Everybody admires Ikaria because they live for over 100 years. And in Ikaria, you don't die if you don't exceed 100 years old. But sometimes nature reverses itself. It is well known, the stories of pathophysiology of the disease, where we have a problem in the gene of frataxin with GAA. Naturally, in a natural person, this triplet has repetitions from 6 to 36. In ataxia Friedreich, these repetitions go over 66. Some people say more than 66. Roughly, what we see, more than 100 or up to 1,700. And this is extremely significant because the diagnosis gets through the gene, and we can see all these things and have to do with the prognosis of the disease. As the more serious it is, the more the repetitions. Perhaps they have 1,200, 1,700 repetitions. The lower this number, the prognosis is better. We are talking about a problem, dysfunction of mitochondria and the disturbances in the production of energy. Therefore, the mitochondrion and the consequences that we have with the cells. Therefore, we are talking about the body, fingers, legs and hands, dysarthria, diabetes. What I would say, because I address children, I am a cardiologist that I will undertake children's ages, is what we start with a clumsy child, which is clumsy. And I'm mentioning that because in pediatrics, if something is out of the natural, the pediatricians are familiar and they always have a cardiovascular control and check. There were cases where we had the diagnosis in HEFAA hospital in Thessaloniki from the cardiological part, that is to say, before ataxia was named, we had the clumsy child from which we asked to have a cardiological check, and immediately we have with the alarm, we have the genetist who comes to get together the puzzle parts, hypertrophic and myocardiological and cardiopathy, and in a preventive test that we may have, we are talking about hypertrophic cardiopathy together with the neurological issues, and that's how we got to the diagnosis. That is to say, starting with the first neurological symptoms in combination that the pediatrician who is familiarized a sense for cardiological control, we have the Friedreich's ataxia. And all the things that were said by the previous speakers, that the ages that we usually see, and we have the majority of diagnosis at the age of 15, I believe that in the years to come, this will be decreased because now we are more familiar and much more easily we can have the diagnosis, and we have gene controls compared to previous years. That is to say, we have become wiser. Therefore, this delay in diagnosis of previous years, I believe that from now on will be much sooner with better results in improving the situation of these children. What we all know is that all of them will have a problem with myocardiopathy. In the cases where the first diagnosis of ataxia without having cardiological tests, it is self-evident that the cardiological test will follow, which in its majority will prove the existence of myocardiopathy. Whatever, also what was nice to be said is that we may have myocardiopathy with the absence of neurological symptoms. Now, how often does a Friedreich ataxia occurs? And there, 5%, which you understand is a very, very small percent, where we can have Friedreich's ataxia with cardiovascular and have a lack of neurological symptoms, was said, of course, earlier on. As regards the cardiovascular, taking into consideration that it is a mitochondrial disturbance, we have a lack of protein. This leads to myocardiopathy inosis and fibrosis. And we have rarely, we can have asymmetric hypertrophic and even more rarer. Therefore, the myocardiopathy hypertrophic prevails, but it is not the classic one, or the inherited myocardiopathy has nothing to do with the hypertrophic myocardiopathy of Friedreich's ataxia, because here we have the intervention, the delayed end. We have, that is to say, we lose the heart process. That is to say, we cannot have beta blockers treatment, which is the choice in the hypertrophic myocardiopathy. When we started with a child, for example, with a diagnosis of hypertrophic myocardiopathy, the first thing we did was beta blockers. When we had the gene diagnosis that we have Friedreich's ataxia, we stopped these blockers because it creates problems. It is very basic to us. We have become wiser in all this throughout the time as regards the address of the children with these cardiological problems. The index of serious cardiological disease mainly is what I said, that it has to do with the age. The earlier we start, we have the neurological symptoms, the worse the prognosis will be, and also as regards the number of the triplet repetition. And this does not have to do with the neurological symptoms and the duration of the disease. Perhaps we have people that are at a late age and with serious neurological symptoms, but they have decreased triplet repetitions. And of course, it is difficult to estimate the seriousness of the cardiac participation because of the comorbidities. The help that we have is the echo. In very few minutes, you have the diagnosis, and now that we are acquainted with the myocardiopathy, we are very familiar in order to see things more than we used to see in the past, that is microgranular and so on and so forth, which direct us, guide us better in early diagnosis and treatment. The MRI helps quite a lot. Yes, it is an expensive examination, but mostly it will confirm to you with who, to see this inosis, the Friedreich's ataxia.
Sometimes it is not the hypertrophy as such, but the fibrosis. But of course, we can use newer techniques, the strain rate, in the ultrasound, where we can detect subclinical patients that, and this is going to help in the future. The ECG is characteristic, and you see a very simple test, very simple tests. These clumsy children that we see, they visit us, and only from the ECG, which is something very quick, and you can have the diagnosis and the ultrasound later on. So we have characteristic signs that you can see here, conductivity disorders, and this is the result of the fibrosis in the myocardium with the blocks and everything, as you can see here. But specifically these disorders, the conductivity disorders, are the main characteristic. Now about the treatment, many things have been said. As a conclusion, I can say that indebenon, an antioxidative agent, something that we work is the antioxidative agents. So indebenon has some very good outcomes. This is something to be seen later on. This is the only tool that we have in the antioxidant group, which has to do with the transfer of electrons and the restoration of energy. There are some results that says that we have an improvement of the hypertrophy of the myocardium. We will see later on how things will be affected. I'm not going to tell you some studies that have been published with many patients that we have some positive outcomes, but as you can understand, many things need to be done in order to have our final conclusions. I would like to have to give some hope, some optimistic messages. Gene treatments we do not have in people. The first efforts that have been carried out in mice showed a reverse of the biochemical and the cellular changes in myocardiopathy, but this only in mice. I think that the future in medicine is going to be something extraordinary, and I think that in a few years, and I really believe that in the future, this is something that will be quite different from what we are seeing today. Everything will be related to genes, to genetics. We will be able to intervene in these genes and have targeted treatments, the same disease in different people with these triplets and these sequences and these repetitions. We will be able to intervene in a targeted way. I believe that this is the future. It's going to be extraordinary and very impressive. I would like again to give my congratulations to Mr. Karatzias that today we have the first conference on this rare disease, the Pan-Hellenic conference. I really hope the best and wish the best for the president and the members of this association. We need them, we need their help. Thank you very much.
Να ευχαριστήσω και εγώ τον
I would
κύριο
like to thank Mr. Giannopoulos for this very comprehensive presentation. You gave us information about the various aspects and you gave us some hope for the future. We do not have time for questions. Now, you stressed that sometimes cardiology problems is the way to have the diagnosis of the patients, but more frequently the orthopedics problems give us a suspicion that this disease is now happening, taking place. We are going to manage these symptoms and these signs. So Likisas Marios has the floor from the University of Crete. Thank you very much. Allow me to start with a small story. Some years ago, I was visited by an adolescent with his family with one of the most frequent symptoms that adolescents face, scoliosis. One of the most common problems in adolescence, and he had the surgery. He underwent surgery. There were some other problems of neurological nature that we detected. So when Alkis visited me again, the diagnosis was Friedreich's ataxia. So we have patients that visit us for orthopedic reasons, and the diagnosis comes later on.
Αισθάνομαι λοιπόν πολύ τυχερός σήμερα και είναι μεγάλη μου τιμή.
It is a great honor for me that I got to know these people, and I became a member of this family, a family that is called Ataxia of Friedreich, and I would like to warmly congratulate Mr. Karatzias, the president, and his team for everything that he has accomplished today. Waiting for the slides of the speaker. There is always a plan B if this does not work.
Χωρίς να θέλω να σας κουράσω, λοιπόν, μέσα στα επόμενα 10 λεπτά θα σας πω μερικά πράγματα.
In the next 10 minutes, I'll tell you a few things that have to do with the orthopedic problems that may arise. These problems is the spinal cord and foot.
Συνήθως έχουμε λοιπόν έναν αδύναμο βραχυπερονιαίο και
There.
προσωπονιαίο και έναν δυνατό οπίστιο κρυμιαίο και μακρό περονιαίο, οι οποίοι ανταγωνίζονται να δημιουργούν την παραμόρφωση αυτή. Και η παραμόρφωση αυτή ουσιαστικά
This problem is
τον πληνισμό, δηλαδή την έσωστροφή του προστίου ποδός και την αντισταθμιστική ρευότητα της στέρνας. Υπάρχει ένα πολύ συχνό τεστ το οποίο χρησιμοποιούμε σε
There is a very usual frequent test that we use for these people that includes the support on a block. So, if the heel is corrected, we talk about a flexible malformation. Otherwise, we're talking about a rigid malformation. So, children and adolescents with these problems, when they suffer from ataxia of Friedreich, very usually they also suffer from pain due to the problems on the legs. Also, pain on the outer surface of the foot, because usually they walk in a very peculiar way, and this means that there is a problem that is created on the surface of the foot, on the lower surface of the foot. At the same time, not so frequent, there's going to be pain in other parts of the foot. Now, the way that we're going to approach a patient that suffers from all these problems depends on the severity of malformation, whether there are symptoms, other symptoms as well from the ataxia of Friedreich, and whether we talk about an ambulatory patient or not. In mild cases, we use an arthrex, which is placed inside the shoe. Sometimes we can choose to have a surgical procedure for patients that are in a more severe cases. And depending on the severity of the problem, we try to correct the problems that exist in the joint or the various parts of the foot. Of course, I'm talking about ambulatory patients, but usually the foot is neglected in these patients. Now, when we talk about the spine and the malformations, we have two big categories. When we have the scoliosis and or kyphosis. According to the international medical literature, the spinal malformation in these children with ataxia of Friedreich ranges from 63 to 100%. 63% is mentioned by a study based on a DNA test in younger children. So this incident is reduced. practically the incidence is higher than 63%, closer to 90 to 100%. So this ataxia is scoliosis is manifested a few years after the ataxia and affects both genders. It is very interesting that scoliosis in ataxia of Friedreich is combined with kyphosis, something that is not very common when we have idiopathic scoliosis, which is the most frequent one. In a big number of cases, 1/3 of the patients that have malformation of the spine are not going to require a specific method of treatment. Treatment is required when we have a progressive deterioration of the malformation, and this is usually for children when the scoliosis is diagnosed before the age of 15, and in children with ataxia before the age of 10. Malformations that we see in the spine in children with ataxia of Friedreich are radiologically similar to the ones that we see in idiopathic malformations of the spine. And this is something that confuses us, as happened in the case of Akis that I mentioned at the beginning. An exception is the malformations that we see in other neurological diseases that lead to the displacement of the body in towards one direction. As I said, 45 to 70% scoliosis is combined with kyphosis. A very peculiar, specific characteristic is that we have left thoracic problems compared to the right ones that we see in other idiopathic scoliosis. Ataxia of Friedreich follows the specific rules concerning the clinical treatment, the drugs and medication to be used, and the surgical procedure that can be used. As in all spinal malformations, a guardian is used when we have malformation from 25 to 50 degrees, but also in children or adolescents that cannot undergo a surgical procedure due to the problems with the heart. But it seems that in children with ataxia of Friedreich, the guardian is not effective. It is not going to affect the degenerative progress of the disease. So we see a deterioration of the malformation inside the guardian. Now about the imaging control, we have an assessment and evaluation of the spine because the spine can affect the way that the head is held and the hip as well. I would like you to know that there are studies that show that sometimes we have in the MRI the anatrophy, which is shown. So the CT scan is very useful for us, for children that have a big degree of malformation, and this can help us in order to design the surgical procedure. It is very important to have a good cooperation with cardiologists, children's cardiologists that are going to assess the child and give us the okay in order to go on with the surgery. And sometimes we have problems with the lungs as well. And of course, we have to exclude the possibility of diabetes mellitus that could affect the surgical procedure. When we have over 50 degrees malformation, the surgeon must be aware of the problems that might exist. Osteopenia, for example, for children that use a wheelchair, and urology problems. And something very specific is the absence or reduction of the sensory potentials that we see during the surgical procedure. What does this practically mean? During the surgical procedure, we have the corrections carried out. A neurologist is present in the operating room, giving us some potentials in order to record the function of the spinal cord. Unfortunately, this cannot be done in these children with ataxia of Friedreich. This is something that we can overcome in recent years with the recording of the potentials and the possibility to place the inserts, the graphs very accurately using robotic medicine now. When we have idiopathic, in these children, we have to include every curvature, and when we have a child that is not ambulatory, we have to expand our procedure up to the hip so that the correct position is given to the child sitting on the wheelchair. Again, it was a great honor to be here today with you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Mr. Leonidas for his speech that shed light to all the problems, orthopedic problems that might exist for these patients and their quality of life. As I said, we do not have time for questions, so I would like to ask the last speaker, Mrs. Karadima, Assistant Professor in Biology and Neurogenetics at Eginitio Hospital, to develop us the position of genetics in guiding these patients. Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much, the association, for the invitation to be a speaker in the Ferenc conference. I would like to ask Mr. Mercedes for his introduction. I'm going to talk to you about the contribution of the neurogenetics unit to the diagnosis and study of the ataxia of Friedreich in Greek patients. These are some limitations, and this is the outline of my presentation. I'm going to give you some genetic information about the gene, and in the end, I'm going to focus on the capabilities, on the possibilities that we have at our unit now and in the future about the diagnosis, provision of assistance, both for the patients and their families. As you know, the cell is the subunit of the body, and we can see it only through specific tools. In the nucleus of each cell, we have the genetic material, the DNA. This DNA is stored in 23 chromosome pairs. And we have there the genes that have the codifying information about the proteins required by our body. In this slide, you can see the 23 chromosome pairs, 22 autosomal ones. Each one comprises two chromosomes, exactly the same. And here we have the FX gene, which is responsible for the ataxia of Friedreich. Here we see the fratraxin gene, 5 code regions. These red boxes were codified. We have the information in order to create the fratraxin protein. Between the boxes 1 and 2, the actions, we have the repetition GAA, you can see on the picture, and when we have variation of these repetition, when we have more than 66 repetitions, this gene is abnormal pathogen for the person that carries it. And it has to be mutated in both chromosomes because we're talking in ataxia of Friedreich about a autosomal recessive disease. Smaller than 66 repetitions, we're talking about the normal gene. More than 66, we have the abnormal one. This is related to 96% of the ataxia of Friedreich cases. In very rare cases, we have we have point mutations, these red boxes, one nucleotide to change in one of them. In this case, these people have in one chromosome the abnormal repetition of GAA, in the other chromosome, they have a point mutation. So we're talking about a combinational heterozygotypes. The more repetitions we have, the more severe the symptoms and the earlier the age of the onset of the disease. So we have the GAA mutation, increase the repetitions of GAA more than 66. The gene stops functioning. Frataxin protein is, the production of this protein is blocked. And fratraxin protein is very important to have the function of mitochondrions. We're talking about very small formations inside the cell generating energy. When we do not have energy generated, the cell cannot function, so there is a necrosis. The fratraxin gene is expressed in the cardiac tissue, neurological tissue, and the pancreas. So the most common clinical signs focus on these specific tissues. Now, 1997 and onwards, we understood and discovered the fratraxin gene and saw the mutations related to the disease, and with the progress of the molecular medicine and genetics, we can now detect the disease in the DNA of each person. So we can provide genetic control both for the patients and the normal carriers of the disease. So we start from the clinician, specialist, or a clinical genetician that protocols from the guidelines of the international literature will be applied in order to detect the error in the fratraxin gene. 96% of the cases, the key error is the GAA repetition of action 1, and in some cases we have point mutations. So the laboratory protocols are a big PCR, a multiplication of the region that includes these 3 nucleotide repetition, or a PCR that has another axis. We use them in order to detect this 3 nucleotide repetition, whether the Sanger sequencing, reading one by one of the bases of the codifying regions, is used in order to determine the very rare point mutations, and in this way to find the combined heterozygotes. So these two techniques are applied at the Eginitio Hospital. Since 1997 to date, 619 genetic controls have been performed. 111 cases were positive for ataxia of Friedreich, and 102 were normal carriers. Now, recapping, we're talking about an autosomal recessive disease, which means that for a person to get the disease, both genes in pair 9 chromosomes must be mutated. These children, as a rule, come from parents, as you can see here, man and woman, are normal carriers. As you can see in their chromosomes, they have an abnormal chromosome and one normal, so they are carriers of the mutation. 25% possibility the first child to have ataxia of Friedreich, 50% to have children that are going to be carriers, to have the mutation only in one of the chromosomes, and 25% that have two normal chromosomes. It is a key to see, to examine the carriers when we have a family of which a member has ataxia of Friedreich, the parents and the siblings must be controlled. It is very important when we have scheduled pregnancies, prenatal control and tests must be carried out, and this is the only way to prevent the transfer of the mutated gene in the next generations, and this is a way to abolish the disease, increase the incidence of the disease, as you heard from the previous speakers, is when there is some kind of affinity between the parents and the common origin. So in our unit, most of you know it because you have visited us. We have a special clinic, genetics clinic, and neurogenetic laboratory. These are combined and cooperate, so in the end, we can have a timely and valid diagnosis. We provide consultancy, genetics consultancy, and follow-up for our patients. In the last 4 years, we have radical developments in the first neurology clinic at the Eginitio Hospital. Since 2019, we are a reference center for rare diseases for Greek population. In 2020, the first neurology clinic was included in the European networks for rare neurology diseases, and of course, the ataxia of Friedreich is included in one of them, and of course, in IFAX. In the last 4 years, EVIAN also is a research program that started by Stefanis and Partegaraki 2 years ago, aiming at providing genetic diagnosis and clinical diagnosis free of charge for the Greek population and genetic control of rare neurological diseases. In this program, Ataxia of Friedreich is not included. And because there is a pan-Hellenic network, we believe that in the future it will be included. Finally, apart from all this, a few words about the tests that are qualitative certified by a European network, UN, and in the last years, through cooperations between us and the laboratory of neurogenetics in Cyprus, we have a collaboration and confirmation of the results. In the future, we are going to have a great development in our laboratory because we're expecting specific instruments for targeted and non-targeted DNA analysis tests. Many genes are going to be tested using new generation sequencing, automated instrument for DNA isolations, and this means that the results are going to be more coordinated and sooner than what is happening now. And accuracy. The space that we have in the laboratory is expanded by 25 square meters for the new instruments and computing. We are ready. After 1 year, the Neurologic laboratory to get the national certification, and I would like to thank Mr. Karatzias and your association for the help provided for the calibration of the instruments and the machines that we use. One of the many tests that we had to take in order to get the certification. Thank you very much for your attention. Whatever happens, new medicines, I am optimistic about new treatments, but in order to eliminate the disease, if the screening, the genetic screening is included in the prenatal test of a person that wants a child in the family, this is a procedure which is not very expensive and will have radical outcomes. Thank you very much.
Να ευχαριστήσω την κυρία Καραδίμα για την εξαιρετική αυτή παρουσίαση και για την ενημέρωση.
Thank you, Mrs. Karadima, for the excellent presentation and the information she gave us, which plays a decisive role. As I said, we do not have time for questions. I would like to thank all the speakers, and I think it was confirmed that the level of provision of services in our country as regards the Friedreich ataxia is great. Thank you very much for the time being. Thank you, Mr. Kimiskidis, Mr. Koutsis, Dinopoulos, Giannopoulos, Likisas, Mrs. Karadima, for the very important contribution in today's event. I think the fact that we came at 1 o'clock shows the interest and I think we will not have time for our break because we have people from Australia and the United States. Therefore, we should be on time. Therefore, I know that you are tired, but let's give a stretch for 5 minutes and then we change the panel and we carry on. Thank you very much.